I've started a new channel called Lunila Tales. Please subscribe and watch my best stories there. Link is in the description. The arrow flew through the humid air like it had no idea it was about to rewrite galactic history. It whistled past the swarm of strange, armored creatures who had landed in the middle of the Amazon jungle with their shiny weapons, glowing helmets, and arrogant smirks. They had been laughing a second ago. Actually laughing. Mocking the lone human standing there in ripped cargo pants, barefoot, sweat dripping into his eyes, holding what to them looked like a child's toy, a crude bow strung together with vine and stubbornness. Their leader, a towering alien with a polished silver chest plate and far too much confidence, had turned his back to him, still chuckling at the absurdity of this primitive man. Which made what happened next feel almost rude. Because that arrow, launched from a handmade bow, slammed into the alien commander's neck with a wet thwack. He made a sound somewhere between a roar and a cough, stumbled 2 steps, and collapsed like a malfunctioning refrigerator. Dead. Just like that. The aliens froze. The jungle froze. Even the parrots in the trees shut up for the first time all day. Jack Monroe blinked at his bow, then at the alien corpse, then back at his bow. His expression could best be described as wait, what? He had only been trying to scare them off, maybe nick an arm if he was lucky. He had not expected to drop the 7-foot cosmic overlord whose spaceship still smoldered in the clearing behind them. Somewhere deep in the alien ranks, someone screamed in their strange metallic language, and then chaos erupted. Jack turned and ran. He did not wait to see what happened next because running had kept him alive for the last 6 months, ever since his plane had gone down in this godforsaken jungle. The aliens could add themselves to the long list of things trying to kill him, right behind mosquitoes the size of helicopters and snakes with names that sounded like diseases. Behind him, the aliens shouted, their words sharp and full of panic. One of them actually yelled something that sounded suspiciously like he killed the commander with a stick. Get him. But Jack could have imagined that. He didn't speak alien arrogant yet. Branches whipped his face as he sprinted downhill, heart hammering like a bad drummer. He could hear the alien boots clanking behind him, glowing drones zipping overhead. It would have been terrifying if part of his brain wasn't laughing at the absurdity of it all. He had killed an alien warlord with a bow he made out of bamboo and fishing line. Somewhere in the galaxy, Jack thought that had to be breaking news. He dove into a narrow gully just as a beam of blue plasma scorched the tree above him. Bark exploded like fireworks. Jack rolled behind a mossy rock, gasping for breath. His bow felt ridiculously small in his hand compared to the death rays whizzing around. He had exactly 3 arrows left. One was bent. Another had feathers half chewed off by a monkey he had wrestled for it yesterday. His odds of surviving felt somewhere between ha no and you must be joking. The jungle around him pulsed with the noise of alien soldiers spreading out, scanning the trees with beams of red light. Jack stayed perfectly still. He had learned quickly that the jungle was like a nosy neighbor. You made one wrong move and it told everyone exactly where you were. The aliens stopped near the commander's body, voices rising in panic. From his hiding spot, Jack watched them kneel beside the corpse, scanners whirring, helmets glowing. One of them held up the arrow like it was some kind of cursed relic. Another shouted something that sounded like "Bring me the caveman alive." Again, maybe Jack was imagining things. He crawled slowly backward through the undergrowth, every muscle aching from tension. He needed distance, needed to disappear before they realized he hadn't gone far. Because if there was one thing Jack Monroe knew about arrogant conquerors from space, it was that they did not take losing well. Especially not to someone wearing a shirt that had been washed in a river for the last half-year. Thunder rumbled overhead, thick clouds gathering fast. The Amazon sky could change its mind quicker than a cat, and Jack silently prayed for rain. Heavy rain meant mud. Mud meant tracks vanished. Tracks vanished meant maybe, just maybe, he would survive long enough to figure out what the hell was happening. The first drops fell as he reached the shallow cave he had been using as a shelter. It wasn't much, just a hollow in the rock with a roof that only leaked in 3 places, but it had kept him alive this long. Jack slid inside, heart still pounding, and listened to the storm swallow the jungle outside. For a few precious moments there was only the roar of rain, the hiss of wind, the distant shouts of confused aliens. Jack leaned against the wall, staring at the bow in his hands. The thing looked pathetic. He had made it in his first desperate week here, after losing everything in the crash except a lighter, 2 protein bars, and a picture of his ex-girlfriend that now served as kindling. The bow had been his hunting tool, his defense against jaguars, and sometimes, when nights got too long, his practice for shooting imaginary ex-bosses. And now it had killed an alien commander. Jack laughed, a short, cracked sound that echoed weirdly in the cave. He didn't know whether to feel proud, terrified, or both. Probably both. Because one thing was certain, those creatures weren't leaving. Not after this. Out in the rain, he heard engines starting up. Shit. Drones. Voices full of anger. The kind of anger that came with revenge. Jack closed his eyes, realizing his life had just become a very complicated mess. Somewhere above the storm, an alien ship's loudspeaker crackled. A voice boomed across the trees in broken English, full of fury and promise. "Human with the stick. We are coming for you." Jack groaned, dragging his hand down his face. Perfect. Just perfect. Rain turned the jungle into a dripping, steaming maze that swallowed sound and light in equal measure. Jack crouched inside the shallow cave, listening to the furious alien voices carried by the storm. He did not need to understand their language to know he had become enemy number 1. Maybe even number 0. Somewhere out there, an alien commander lay dead with a handmade arrow in his neck, and Jack had a feeling his name was now burned into their shiny little helmets as public enemy of the galaxy. He peeked out through the curtain of rain. The clearing where the spaceship had landed was now crawling with alien soldiers, their armor glowing faintly in the gray light. Drones zipped overhead, scanning the trees with relentless precision. Jack shivered despite the humidity. He knew the jungle well enough to survive jaguars, snakes, and bugs that sounded like chainsaws, but aliens with death rays were an entirely different problem. Still, there was a part of him, buried somewhere between the exhaustion and hunger, that found the whole thing ridiculous. He had been stranded here for months, living on roots, berries, and the occasional very slow bird. He had wrestled with monkeys over bananas, fallen out of trees twice, and nearly died from food poisoning after eating a brightly colored frog. Now apparently he was the most dangerous man on Earth because he had shot one arrow at the wrong or maybe the right guy. Life had a sense of humor. Down in the clearing, the aliens moved with mechanical precision. Jack watched through the leaves as 2 of them dragged the commander's body toward the ship. A third held up his arrow again, gesturing angrily toward the jungle. Jack squinted through the rain, watching their movements closely. They were scared. That was interesting. Not angry. Not vengeful. Scared. That thought stuck with him as he crawled out of the cave and slipped into the trees. He needed food, water, and a better plan than hiding in holes until they found him. The storm helped. Heavy rain blurred the jungle into a green wall, covering his tracks and masking his movements. He moved silently through the undergrowth, following familiar paths toward a small creek where he had set traps earlier. On the way, he caught glimpses of alien patrols sweeping the jungle floor. Their armor gleamed faintly in the wet light, their weapons humming like angry bees. Once, he froze as 2 of them passed within 10 feet of him, scanning the trees with strange red lights. He held his breath until they moved on, muttering in their metallic language. At the creek, one of his traps had worked. A fat jungle rat squirmed inside a crude cage made of vines and sticks. Jack killed it quickly and stuffed it into his pack. Dinner was dinner, even when it tasted like boiled leather. The rain eased by the time he made it back to his cave. He skinned the rat, built a small fire deep inside where the smoke would not give him away, and roasted the meat slowly while he thought. The aliens had numbers, weapons, and technology he did not understand. He had a bow, a handful of arrows, and a jungle that obeyed no one. On paper, it was not much of a fight, but he had seen their faces back in the clearing. They had been terrified when their commander fell, not angry the way soldiers got when their leader died in battle. Scared like something had happened that was not supposed to be possible. That meant something. He tore off a strip of roasted meat and chewed slowly, ignoring the taste. If killing one alien commander shook them that badly, maybe they were not as invincible as they looked. Maybe this jungle, brutal and unpredictable, was as dangerous to them as it was to him. That thought settled in his mind like a seed. Before he could think further, he heard the distant whine of engines. He crawled to the mouth of the cave and peered out. A sleek alien ship swooped low over the treetops, scattering birds in all directions. A mechanical voice boomed through the humid air. Human with the stick. Surrender now. Jack almost laughed. Human with the stick. That was what they were calling him. Across the galaxy, entire armies armed with weapons that could vaporize mountains, and he was human with the stick. The ship circled twice, then disappeared toward the west. Jack exhaled slowly. They were not leaving. Not until they had him. Fine, he thought. Let them come. Over the next 2 days, the hunt intensified. Jack stayed one step ahead by sheer luck and a lifetime of bad camping trip. He set false trails, used rivers to hide his scent, and once even disguised himself with mud to avoid thermal scans after seeing it in some old action movie. The aliens grew frustrated. Their voices carried farther through the jungle, angrier now, sharper. The turning point came on the third night. Jack was huddled in a tree, trying to sleep sitting up, when he saw movement below. At first he thought it was another alien patrol. But then he realized something was off. This one moved differently. Slower. Hesitant. The alien looked around nervously before removing its helmet. Jack caught a glimpse of gray skin, large dark eyes glinting in the moonlight. It muttered something in its language, then in halting English said, "You kill Commander. You make big trouble." Jack stayed perfectly still. The alien glanced over its shoulder, then back up at Jack's tree. "Others come soon. But I not tell. I know like them." Jack stared down, trying to read its expression. It was hard to tell with a face built like a skull and eyes the size of golf balls. But the voice carried something unexpected. Fear. Maybe even desperation. "Why?" Jack asked finally, keeping his voice low. The alien hesitated, then said, "They conquer. They take all worlds. I want to stop them. You maybe help." Then it slipped back into the shadows before Jack could answer, leaving him alone with the sound of the jungle and a dozen new questions. By morning, the soldiers were back, shouting orders and firing at shadows. Jack moved through the trees silently, mind racing. He had spent months surviving the jungle, barely hanging on. Now a rebel alien wanted his help to stop its own people. He was no hero. He was just a guy with a bow and some bad luck. But as he watched the furious soldiers searching for him, Jack felt something shift. Maybe bad luck was exactly what these aliens deserved. The sun rose over the jungle like it had no idea there were angry aliens stalking through the trees. Jack sat on a branch high above the forest floor, chewing the last of his roasted rat and trying to figure out what to do about the mysterious alien who had spoken to him the night before. The creature's words had been broken and strange, but the meaning was clear enough. It hated its own people. It wanted to stop them. And for some reason, it thought Jack, a stranded wildlife photographer with a bow and questionable hygiene, was the one who could help. Below him, the jungle stirred with life. Bright birds called to each other in the dripping canopy. Something large crashed through the undergrowth far off to the east, probably a tapir or maybe one of those wild pigs that traveled in packs like drunken bikers. For a moment it almost felt like a normal morning again, before spaceships and plasma rifles and voices booming through the trees demanding his surrender. Then the first explosion rattled the air. Jack jerked his head toward the sound. A cloud of smoke rose through the treetops to the south, followed by the high-pitched whine of alien drones. He squinted through the branches and saw flashes of blue light. Plasma fire. The soldiers were clearing sections of the jungle now, blasting through anything that might hide him. Trees fell in bursts of fire and splinters. Parrots screamed in protest and scattered in all directions. So much for hiding in trees. Jack climbed down quickly, heart pounding. The aliens were getting serious. He had pushed his luck too far, and now they were burning the jungle down around him. He needed a plan before they cornered him like a rat in a maze. As he hit the ground, movement flickered in the shadows to his left. He spun with his bow drawn, arrow ready, only to see the same alien from last night step into view with its hands raised. "You make big trouble," the alien said again in its rough English. Voice carried over fire. "They angry now?" Jack lowered the bow slightly but kept the arrow nock. The creature looked different in daylight. Its skin was pale gray, almost smooth like polished stone, with faint blue lines glowing along its arms. Its eyes were large and black, reflecting everything without giving away a single thought. "Why are you helping me?" Jack asked. The alien glanced toward the smoke where the soldiers advanced. "Because they take all worlds. My world too. No freedom. Only command. Only empire." Jack studied it for a long moment. He could see tension in the alien's movements, the way it kept looking over its shoulder like a man on the run. This was not a trap. It was running from them as much as he was. "What do you want from me?" Jack said finally. The alien hesitated. "You kill Commander. First time, someone fight back and win. Others in Empire will hear. Maybe rise up. Maybe break power. But only if big ship falls. You help, maybe big ship dies." Jack almost laughed. Him. Take down a spaceship the size of a small city. With what? His 3 crooked arrows and a lot of bad luck. He opened his mouth to say exactly that, but the alien cut him off. "Commander dead because weak place hit. Arrow find place. Not luck. You see things different. Not like soldiers. Maybe can help again." Another explosion ripped through the trees closer now. The alien flinched and gestured sharply. "Soldiers come. We move. Talk later." Jack followed because honestly he did not have a better idea. They slipped through the dripping undergrowth, moving fast but silent. The alien seemed to know paths even Jack had not found in his months here, weaving through tangled roots and vines until they reached a narrow ravine hidden beneath thick ferns. "Here's safe," the alien said, crouching in the shadows. "For now." Jack leaned against a rock, catching his breath. "So what?" he said finally. "We sneak onto the ship, shoot a couple more arrows, and the Empire falls." The alien tilted its head. "Not so simple. Ship has core. Very strong. But if core breaks, ship dies. Others see Empire weak. Maybe rise up." Jack stared at the dripping rocks around them. He wanted to say this was insane. He wanted to point out he was just a guy who took pictures of birds for magazines before all this. But somewhere in the back of his mind, an idea was taking root. The aliens were powerful, yes. But they were also rigid, predictable, built on fear and control. That made them vulnerable in ways they did not understand. Before he could answer, voices echoed through the ravine above. Jack froze. The alien grabbed his arm and yanked him into a narrow crack in the rock just as a patrol appeared on the rim. He held his breath as soldiers scanned the ravine below with beams of red light. One of them shouted something in their harsh language. Another fired a shot into the trees, sending birds screaming into the sky. The alien beside Jack tensed but stayed perfectly still. Minutes dragged like hours until finally the soldiers moved on, their voices fading into the distance. Jack exhaled slowly. That was close. Too close. The alien turned toward him. "We must move soon. They search everywhere. No time." Jack nodded reluctantly. He had spent months running from snakes, jaguars, storms, and starvation. But running from an empire with spaceships felt like a whole new level of impossible. As they left the ravine, Jack noticed more smoke rising through the jungle. The soldiers were tearing it apart now, cutting lines through the forest with fire and machines. The air smelled of burning wood and ozone. That night, hiding in another cave miles from the destruction, the alien told him more about the Empire. Worlds conquered. Cities turned to ash. Entire species wiped out or enslaved. The commander Jack had killed was one of many, but his death mattered because it had never happened before. No primitive world had ever struck back and won, not even by accident. Jack listened in silence. He felt like someone had handed him a story too big to hold. He was not a soldier or a rebel or even particularly brave. He was just the wrong guy in the wrong place with a bow he barely knew how to use. And yet somehow the fate of more than one world now hung in the balance because of him. As the alien spoke, Jack realized something else. The Empire would not stop. Not after losing their commander. Not after this humiliation. They would burn the entire jungle to the ground to find him. He looked at the alien across the firelight. "If we are going to take down your big ship," Jack said slowly, "we are going to need a lot more than my bow." The alien's dark eyes reflected the flames. "Then we find weapons. We find allies. Or we die." Somewhere in the distance, a deep mechanical roar echoed through the night as the Empire's ships circled like vultures waiting for the kill. Jack woke before dawn to the sound of the alien pacing near the cave entrance. The creature moved like a shadow, silent and restless, its glowing blue lines pulsing faintly in the dark. Jack stretched his stiff arms and sat up, feeling the weight of exhaustion pressing behind his eyes. He had barely slept, haunted by thoughts of giant ships, rebel uprisings, and the impossible idea of bringing down an empire with a bow and a few jungle tricks. The alien stopped pacing when it saw him awake. "We move today," it said simply. Voice carried far now. "Soldiers search harder. Time short." Jack rubbed his face. "Fine. Move." Where exactly? The alien crouched near the fire pit, its black eyes glinting in the faint light. "I know place," it said. "Old crash from Empire War. Weapons there. Maybe still work." Jack blinked. "You mean to tell me there is a pile of alien weapons just lying around out here, and you are only now bringing this up?" The alien tilted its head in that strange way it did whenever it was confused by his tone. "Not close," it said. "Very dangerous. Empire never take because many beasts. Very angry." Of course there were angry beasts. There were always angry beasts. Jack sighed and packed what little he had. A bow. 3 arrows. Half a water gourd. His entire worldly possessions now fit into a piece of cloth slung over his shoulder. They set out through the dripping forest, moving fast but silent. The alien led the way, its movements quick and precise, always watching the sky for drones. Jack followed, trying not to think about the fact that he was about to walk into a place even the Empire avoided because of monsters. By midday, the jungle grew thicker, darker, almost unnaturally quiet. Jack noticed claw marks on the trees, deep grooves that could only have come from something large. Something very large. The alien stopped often, scanning the shadows with an intensity that made Jack's skin crawl. "What exactly lives out here?" Jack whispered once. The alien answered without turning. "Things that eat soldiers." Jack muttered under his breath. "Perfect." They reached the crash site by late afternoon. The wreckage lay in a clearing torn open by fire long ago, the twisted metal half buried under vines and moss. Jack could see scorch marks along the hull, strange symbols carved into the sides, and gaping holes where weapons once fired. The place felt wrong, silent in a way the jungle never was, like even the insects stayed away. Inside, they found what the alien had promised. Broken crates. Scattered armor. A few weapons that looked mostly intact, shaped like rifles but pulsing faintly with some kind of energy. The alien moved quickly, checking each piece with practiced hands while Jack stood guard at the doorway, bow ready though he doubted any arrow would matter against whatever ate soldiers out here. A low growl rumbled from the trees. Jack froze. The alien froze too, one hand hovering over a weapon. The growl came again, closer this time, followed by heavy footsteps circling the clearing. Jack caught glimpses of movement through the trees, flashes of dark fur and glowing eyes. The alien grabbed 2 rifles and tossed one to Jack. Point. Shoot. Loud noise, it said quickly. Jack caught the weapon awkwardly. He had no idea how to fire alien technology, but the growls were getting closer and he figured trial and error was about to become his new best friend. The first creature lunged out of the trees moments later, a nightmare of teeth and claws bigger than a horse, moving with terrifying speed. Jack yelped and pulled the trigger instinctively. A blast of blue energy roared from the rifle, slamming into the beast's chest and sending it tumbling backward in a flash of light. Jack stared at the weapon, half shocked it had actually worked. More creatures charged from the trees. The alien fired calmly, dropping them one by one with precise shots. Jack shot wildly, hitting more dirt than target, but sheer luck and panic carried him through until the clearing fell silent again, except for the hiss of smoking fur. The alien tossed him a small metal cylinder. Grenade. Use careful. Big boom. Jack clipped it to his belt, feeling very underqualified for whatever war he had just been drafted into. By the time they left the wreckage, they carried 2 rifles, a handful of grenades, and a small device the alien said could disrupt shields on the Empire's ship. Jack did not understand half of it, but he understood shields coming down sounded useful. They camped that night in a hollow tree far from the wreck. Jack sat cleaning mud off his new rifle while the alien sketched something in the dirt with a stick. A rough shape of the Empire's big ship. Here core, the alien said, pointing to the center. Very strong. But if shields fall, maybe weak place hit like Commander before. Jack studied the drawing. So we sneak in, drop the shields, blow the core, and run for our lives, the alien nodded. That's simple. Simple, Jack muttered. Right. Like wrestling a jaguar with a stick is simple. The alien tilted its head again. You joke much, it said. Keeps me from crying, Jack answered. Over the next 2 days they planned. Jack learned quickly how to use the alien rifle without shooting himself in the foot. He practiced throwing grenades at rotten logs until one went off early and nearly took his eyebrows off. The alien showed him how to move unseen, how to track patrol patterns, how to read the strange symbols on stolen Empire map. Despite himself, Jack felt something almost like hope stirring beneath the exhaustion. For the first time since crashing here, he was not just surviving day to day. He had a goal. A crazy, probably suicidal goal, but a goal nonetheless. One night as they crouched over the dirt map, Jack asked the alien its name. The creature paused, then said something in its own language, a sound like wind through metal. Too hard for you. Call me Rin. Rin, Jack repeated. Fine. Rin it is. When the plan was finally ready, Rin drew one last mark on the map where the Empire's ship hovered above the jungle like a metal storm cloud. Tomorrow, Rin said. We start tomorrow. Big ship falls, maybe Empire too. Jack stared at the glowing line of drones circling far above the treetop. Tomorrow. Sure. No pressure at all. As he lay awake in the hollow tree that night, listening to the distant thunder of engines, Jack wondered how in the world his life had gone from taking pictures of toucans to plotting the downfall of galactic tyranny with a rebel alien and a stolen plasma rifle. The jungle outside whispered with wind and rain, hiding them for now. But Jack knew the Empire was searching, burning, closing in. Tomorrow everything would change. For better or worse, he had no idea. But change was coming all the same. The first explosion shook the ground before the sun had even cleared the treetop. Jack crouched low in the undergrowth, gripping the alien rifle so tightly his knuckles hurt. Above the jungle, the Empire's massive ship floated like a metal mountain, engines rumbling, lights sweeping across the trees. Its dark surface bristled with weapons, drones buzzing out from its belly like angry hornets. This was the kind of thing armies should have been dealing with, not one stranded wildlife photographer and a single traitor alien. But here they were, two tiny figures against something the size of a city, about to start a fight that could topple an empire or get them both vaporized in about 5 seconds. Rin knelt beside him, eyes scanning the clearing where the Empire soldiers patrolled around the ship's landing struts. The alien was calm, steady, like this was just another hunt in the jungle rather than an insane suicide mission. "Shields there," Rin murmured, pointing to a glowing tower near the ship's base. "We break it first. Then ship open." Jack nodded grimly. "Right. Just waltz in, blow up the shields, then destroy the core before anyone notices. Easy." The first part of the plan went surprisingly well, mostly because the jungle decided to help. Rin had spent the night setting traps using vines, mud pits, and a few grenades in places only a local would know. When the patrols marched through at dawn, the results were chaotic. One alien soldier fell into a pit full of very angry ants. Another slipped on a vine-slicked slope straight into a waiting grenade Jack had buried under leaves. The rest scattered in confusion as monkeys, apparently bribed with stolen rations, hurled fruit and rocks from the trees. Jack ran through the chaos with Rin close behind, rifle ready, heart pounding like a war drum. They reached the shield tower just as alarms began blaring from the ship above. Rin planted a device at its base, a small metal box covered in glowing lines, then dragged Jack behind a fallen log. "Cover ears," Rin said simply. Jack barely had time to react before the device exploded in a blinding flash. The tower vanished in a burst of blue fire, and the shimmering dome that had covered the ship flickered, cracked, and fell apart like glass in a storm. Alarms screamed louder. Drones swarmed out of the ship's underbelly, weapons firing into the trees. Jack shot back wildly, hitting more leaves than drones, but Rin's aim was perfect, dropping one machine after another with calm precision. "Move," Rin barked, already sprinting toward the massive ramp now lowering from the ship's side. They ran through smoke and mud, weaving between burning patrol vehicles, barely avoiding the blasts tearing up the ground around them. Jack tripped once, nearly lost his rifle, and only kept moving because Rin yanked him upright with surprising strength. Inside the ship, everything changed. The noise of the jungle vanished, replaced by the hum of alien engines and the echo of alarms bouncing off metal walls. The corridors glowed faint blue, full of strange symbols and sealed doors. Rin moved fast, clearly knowing the way, while Jack followed with his heart hammering in his ears. Soldiers appeared at the far end of the hall. Rin shoved Jack through a side passage, tossing him one of the grenades. "Block them," Rin snapped. Jack fumbled with the alien weapon, yanked the pin, or what he hoped was the pin, and hurled it down the corridor. The explosion shook the floor, sending smoke and debris billowing back toward them. Jack grinned despite himself. That felt good. They reached a wide chamber deep in the ship's center. Rin pointed to a massive structure pulsing with light in the middle. "Core there. Very strong. We break, ship die. Empire lose big power." Before Jack could answer, a new voice echoed through the chamber, deep and furious. "Human with the stick." Jack turned slowly. At the far end of the room stood the new commander, taller than any soldier they had seen, armor black as obsidian, eyes glowing like fire. He carried a weapon the size of a small tree and moved with slow, terrifying confidence. Soldiers flanked him on both sides. Jack swallowed hard. "You have got to be kidding me," he muttered. The commander raised his weapon. Rin shoved Jack behind a console just as the first blast of energy tore through the chamber. Metal screamed. Lights shattered. Jack fired back blindly, bolts of blue light cracking across the room. Rin moved like a shadow, fast and precise, drawing the commander's fire while Jack circled wide toward the core. He reached its base, heart pounding, and yanked the last grenade from his belt. "Cover me," Jack shouted. Rin roared something in his own language and opened fire, drawing the soldiers' attention. Jack slammed the grenade against the core's surface where Rin had told him its power lines converged. The commander saw him too late. Jack dove behind a pillar as the grenade detonated. Light swallowed the chamber, a rising scream of energy filling the air. The core cracked like ice under a hammer, energy spilling out in wild, uncontrolled bursts. The commander roared in fury, hurling soldiers aside as he charged through the smoke straight at Jack. Rin intercepted him, weapon flashing, and the two collided in a blur of metal and claws. Jack watched in horror as the commander drove a blade through Rin's side, but the rebel alien held on, locking the commander in place. Now, Rin gasped, voice shaking. Jack grabbed his rifle, aimed at the glowing crack in the core, and fired until the weapon overheated in his hands. The final shot punched through the fracture. The core erupted. Light and fire tore through the chamber, ripping walls apart, hurling soldiers like rag dolls. Jack felt himself thrown backward, hitting the floor hard enough to see stars. He crawled toward Rin through the smoke and chaos. The alien lay bleeding, armor cracked, eyes dimming. Go, Rin rasped. Ship die. You live. Jack shook his head, but Rin shoved him toward the corridor with surprising strength. Above them, the ship groaned like a wounded animal, lights flickering as explosions rippled through its structure. Jack stumbled through collapsing hallways, fire and alarms and screams following him. He barely made it to the outer ramp before the entire core chamber went up behind him in a roaring blast that split the sky. Jack hit the ground hard as the jungle shook like the world itself had decided to come apart. The Empire's great ship slammed into the earth behind him with a noise like mountains breaking, fire and metal ripping skyward in a storm of smoke and heat. Trees flattened for miles. Birds erupted into the air in frantic swarms. The crash rolled through the jungle like thunder made of teeth. Jack lay face down in the mud, arms over his head, waiting for the sky to stop falling. When he finally lifted his face, the ship was a burning wreck sprawled across the jungle like the skeleton of some dead god. Flames roared from its broken spine. Explosions cracked inside as its engines tore themselves apart. The Empire's great power, the thing that had darkened the skies for days, was dying in front of him. But Jack barely saw any of it because Rin was still inside. He stumbled to his feet, heart pounding, scanning the wreck for any sign of the alien. Smoke and fire boiled from the shattered hull. Soldiers ran in all directions, some on fire, some dragging wounded comrades, none with any fight left in them. The Empire's perfect order had collapsed into chaos. Jack staggered toward the wreckage, coughing through the smoke, calling Rin's name though he doubted the alien could even hear him over the roar. He found him near the edge of the crash site, half buried under a twisted piece of metal. Rin's armor was scorched, one arm bent at a terrible angle, blue blood seeping into the mud. Jack hauled the metal off and dragged him clear as the wreck groaned behind them, threatening to collapse completely. Rin's eyes flickered open. Ship gone, he rasped. Empire feel this. All worlds feel. Jack knelt in the mud, gripping his shoulder. Stay with me. We can get you out. Rin's head moved slightly, maybe a shake, maybe just weakness. My fight was never for me. For free worlds. For no more chains. He coughed, dark fluid on his lips. You human with stick. You finish this. Jack opened his mouth to argue, but Rin's eyes had already dimmed. The rebel alien's chest rose once more, then stilled. Jack sat there for a long moment, the fire reflecting in his wide, stunned eyes. Around him, the jungle echoed with distant crashes as the Empire's remaining drones fell from the sky, their control gone with the ship. Soldiers were retreating now, stumbling toward smaller craft that screamed into the atmosphere, leaving the wreckage and their dead behind. The Empire was pulling out. Jack stood slowly, numb all the way to his bones. Rin was gone. The ship was gone. The soldiers were fleeing. The impossible had actually happened. By afternoon the skies were empty again. The jungle smoldered where the ship had carved its death path through the trees, a blackened scar across the green. Jack moved through it in silence, stepping over broken metal and bodies, watching the last Empire craft vanish into the clouds. He half expected them to turn around and finish what they started, but they kept going, running scared for the first time since they had arrived. News would spread. Even Jack understood that much. Somewhere out in the stars, other conquered worlds would hear about the Empire's defeat on a little blue planet no one had cared about until now. Maybe they would rise up. Maybe the Empire would fracture from the inside. He did not know. That was not his fight. His part was over. Days passed. The jungle began to reclaim the wreckage quickly, vines curling over twisted metal, rain hissing through shattered corridors. The smell of smoke faded under the heavy green breath of growing things. Birds returned cautiously, then monkeys, then everything else. Like the forest had decided the whole invasion had just been a bad dream. Jack buried Rin on a hill overlooking the crash site. He used a piece of the ship's armor as a marker, carving the name as best he could in letters that probably looked nothing like the aliens' real language. It was the only grave for miles. He doubted the Empire had buried any of its dead. When he was done, he sat there for a long time watching the jungle swallow the wreck below. He felt hollow, scraped out, too tired to even feel relief properly. The Empire was gone, yes. The planet was safe. But the only one who had understood what this fight really meant now lay under the soil. Weeks later, the first human helicopters finally appeared over the horizon, drawn by the fires and the wreckage visible even from orbit. Jack almost laughed when rescue crews found him sitting on a log eating roasted lizard like nothing had happened. He barely heard their questions over the noise of the rotors. They stared at the alien metal jutting from the earth, at the bodies half buried in ash, at the weapons Jack had stacked neatly near his shelter like firewood. Military teams moved in quickly, swarming over the wreckage, dragging out pieces of technology, arguing over what to do with it all. Jack watched them with distant amusement. They had missed the whole thing. The invasion. The battles. The end of the Empire's great ship. They had shown up for the leftovers. Reporters wanted interviews. Soldiers wanted explanations. Scientists wanted the weapons. Jack wanted a shower and about 300 cups of coffee. They flew him out on the third day, the jungle shrinking beneath the helicopter until the crash site was just a black smudge in the endless green. Jack sat by the window, exhausted, watching it vanish into the clouds. Back in civilization, people called him a hero. They asked him how he had done it, how one man with a bow had brought down an alien empire's flagship. Jack tried explaining about Rin, about weak points and shields and rebellions waiting for a spark, but mostly people preferred the version where he was some kind of fearless warrior. It made a better story. Across the galaxy, on worlds Jack would never see, whispers began spreading about the human with the stick. A soldier who killed a commander with one arrow. A madman who destroyed a battleship with nothing but courage and luck. A legend already warping into myth. Jack found it all ridiculous. He was no legend. He was a guy who wanted coffee and maybe to never see another mosquito again for the rest of his life. Months later, long after the wreckage had been hauled away and scientists had taken every piece of alien technology they could carry, Jack sat in a bar with a cold drink, watching the news talk about advances in energy and medicine thanks to discoveries from the ship. Humanity had leapt forward by decades overnight because of what the Empire left behind. Jack did not care about any of that. He raised his glass quietly to Rin instead, the only reason any of this had happened at all. Somewhere out there, the Empire still existed, wounded but not dead. Maybe one day it would return. Maybe the free worlds would rise first. Jack figured that was someone else's problem. He had done his part. For now, the legend of the human with the stick could belong to everyone else. Jack just wanted to go home,